Thank you so much for joining us today in this Financial Institutions podcast. This podcast is part of our Lender Series, where we tap into the breadth of knowledge and services offered across the various departments and practice areas at BerryDunn. We chat with individuals across the firm about current and emerging topics affecting lending. My name is Susan Weber, 26-year banker with a focus on credit and credit risk. Hosting with me today is BerryDunn's Financial Services Practice Leader, Principal Rob Smalley. Hi, Rob.
Hey, Susan. Glad to be here today. I'm glad to have be co-hosting with our guest, who's a friend, who's a ball of energy, and I can't wait to get into what he's seeing within his industry.
Well, that's great. So I'm so happy to be co-hosting with you because it sounds like you've brought a really great person with you to the studio today. So who are we talking to?
I'm excited that we're going to hear today from my friend and fellow principal, Dimitri Panacopoulos. He is a principal in our healthcare group, but also more specifically, is a national level expert when it comes to home health and hospice organizations. He's got a real genuine passion that comes through every time he talks about these organizations. He wants them to not only survive in today's environment, which is tough, but also thrive. He's one of those guys that you learn something new every time you talk to him. I'm just super excited to have him on today's podcast. And with that, hi, Dimitri.
Hey, well, thanks for having me. It's great to be on your show today. I hope I live up to those expectations. I didn't know I was going to blush today on a Wednesday morning. This is my first podcast adventure. I didn't know what we'd call it, like a podcastic voyage or something, but a little bit about me. You said it well. I'm specialized in working with home health and hospice providers. My career has evolved over the last 16 years. I spent the entirety of my career in this industry. And what I primarily do now is educate my clients how to operationalize their financial results and navigate the landscape, as you said.
Speaking of the landscape, what are you seeing out there in home health and hospice?
Well, truthfully, we're faced with, a lot of challenges, but at the same time, a lot of opportunities, really similar to, I imagine, most industries. And if we're talking home health and hospice specifically, it's almost a tale of two different realities from a financial perspective. On one side of the house, you have home health, and we're seeing just unprecedented levels of scrutiny with reductions in reimbursement. And on the hospice side, we're just seeing the best financial performing years we've ever seen. More on home health, why that is. The primary payer that home health sees is Medicare. And there's really two factors contributing to the overall decline. One is actually Medicare is paying much less. And there's really no other way to put it, but it feels like these agencies are under attack with these rate reductions. And the second thing is there's this other payer that's been growing that it's multiple insurance companies really, but we kind of categorize them all as one thing and we just call them Medicare Advantage. So we're seeing a lot of growth of Medicare Advantage. And actually I was at a conference at the hotel room and there was like a half an hour long special with Joe Namath and a bunch of other patients, and they were saying how great Medicare Advantage was, and it had me believing it because I said I know Joe Namath, and he plays football. I love football. I play fantasy football, so he must know exactly what he's talking about. So it's why that's a problem for home health is, generally speaking, these Medicare Advantage payers, they don't reimburse as fairly as traditional Medicare. So in home health, seeing a lot of rate pressure, changing payer mix, and hospice, we're in the glory days, financially speaking.
So absolutely a lot of changes and challenges. I guess one thing that comes to my mind is in what ways did the pandemic have an influence on maybe some of those aspects, or has that been a game changer in any way?
Yeah, it's almost like you want to say, in what ways didn't it change, right? With virtually everything we're doing nowadays. But from our industry perspective, I would say the pandemic delayed and then accelerated what was going to happen the entire time. Mm-hmm. Delayed from a standpoint of there was a lot of cash that was injected into this industry by the government at a much needed time. There were things like provider relief funds, many different rounds of that. There were these PPP loans that banks helped agencies obtain to keep people employed. And then the newest thing is these employer retention credits, or what we call ERC. It's just more and more funds that are out there available from the government. Yeah, it's much needed funds, but the reality is balance sheets are pumped up. No one was really cash poor, and all these funds did, while they were needed, they definitely masked potentially underlying operational issues. And now you have all these funds going away, and we're still left with the problems. We're left with staff shortages, inflation everywhere, and we just don't have that extra reimbursement. Now, I said a minute ago that hospice seems to be doing well still. Yeah, financially speaking, hospice is doing really well. But I think the overall risk there long term is, how long is that going to last for? How long before their rates start coming under scrutiny and pressure, and then they're going to be dealing with the same challenges that home health sees, still have staff shortages, still have inflation. Those forces seem like it's not going away. Short term, balance sheets are strong. It's not going to last a long time.
Yeah, so a lot to really think about as lenders are thinking about those analytics and what is permanent and what may be temporary in terms of those influences. So your practice area has been really proactive in finding ways to assist healthcare entities. What can you tell us a little bit more about those programs?
Yeah, so I started by saying what my focus is, and really what our entire team's focus is centered around education, not only financial education, but clinical education. And how do we marry the two concepts together? Because what we often see is things start in the clinical world, and the finance people see them at the end of the day, but it's clinical that drove change or made a decision, and the end financials are the end financials. So what we like to do is a very educational focus. Actually, what we did formally is we actually launched the home health and hospice. We were coming up with various different names, but really it's our learning center. And so what's in there to start right now are clinical aspects and opportunities, which if you implement correctly and work on, you should see financial results in the end. But over time, what we're going to do is build content in this learning center, and then truly do what I said and marry the financial and the clinical world together, but in a central repository, essentially, where people could just go in there and look at, what are the best practices around productivity, what are the best practices around outcomes, and kind of see both sides of the house. The other thing that really became recently for us that we've been actually offering our clients, and this is only out of just what we were seeing. So I mentioned the ERC, the employer retention credits. It's not, we've actually gotten into that realm, and it's not really something that we ever thought we would get into, but part of what we do in the financial world is a financial audit. And actually, through doing the financial audit, we had to audit agencies that were filing for these employer retention credits. So we had to gain an understanding of it. We had to know how it works in order to audit it. So essentially, we were doing the service as part of the audit, and said, all right, well, if we're going to do the service, we might as well offer it out to others. And the reason why that is because there was a lot of other competing vendors out there that are taking interesting and aggressive standpoints on things that, maybe you should have a little bit more information on before you file for these funds. I think the most recent interesting thing we saw is one of our clients actually received a notice that looked like it was designed right from the IRS. Like you would get an IRS notification and said, hey, you're eligible to receive $4 million in credits. And so they called the number on the hotline. It went right to a vendor and had nothing to do with the IRS. So there's all these I don't want to call them schemes, but they're really aggressive approaches out there. So we said, you know what, let's offer a solution. We're already doing it anyways inherently now that we understand everything going on. Let's offer a solution for people to consider that isn't, tied to, interesting notifications and email pressure that you're going to run out of time to file these funds and things like that. So.
Yeah. That's really great. And I think the other day when you and I were talking, you mentioned something about an accreditation. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, actually, as part of this, the Learning Center, what we're able to offer now is contact hours for clinicians. So BerryDunn, us as a firm, we are now. I always forget what it actually stands for, but it's mostly referred to as ANCC accredited, which in the financial world we're used to. As a CPA, Rob's a CPA. We're used to doing continuing professional education. We need CPE as a specific requirement. Well, clinicians with a nurse with a clinical license, they have the same requirements we do. It's just a little bit different. So now we're able to offer that as well through our learning center.
Dimitri, you talked a lot about the industry. It's certainly dynamic right now and probably always. There's some great solutions you're providing in terms of education and the audit services. Certainly, what do you see now as in terms of a silver lining for these organizations, or are there any opportunities going forward?
Yeah, we get that question a lot, specifically from these agencies that are living the world. It's one thing to be on the opposite side of the table and providing potential advice on opportunities. It's the other side to actually live it and actually do it. And so we're getting a lot of, what are you seeing out there? It doesn't seem great for me. How is it elsewhere? And so it's a mixed bag, but we've been here before. And so the communication we have with agencies, we've been here before. We've faced challenges before. I mean, we could argue that right now these challenges are a little bit different, but we've seen government pressure before. We've seen rate cuts before. We've seen regulatory scrutiny before. It's nothing that we haven't seen before, and we'll see it 10 years from now, 20 years from now. It's not going to change. But what we have seen is that through those time period, there are agencies that truly adapt and change. And if you roll with the punches and you understand the environment you're in and the landscape you're operating in, you can thrive. And there's plenty of opportunity. Yes, you have to manage your payer mix. Yes, you have to have success at grassroots education with the community and institutional providers. You have to have strong relationships with referrals. There are ways to move forward. There are success paths. It may seem like there's a lot of pressure and globally speaking, the industry is hurting, but there are still a lot of agencies out there that are thriving. So I think it's that age-old saying in business, right? That's if you stay the same, you fall behind. I mean, that's certainly, we live that certainly here at BerryDunn, but at the same time, it's never more true than now.
That's great to hear. You absolutely lived up to the billing today, my friend. This space is so dynamic, as you mentioned. A lot of pressure, a lot of pitfalls out there. But it's great to have people like you and your team, sort of leading the charge and helping people. It's amazing.
Thanks for having me, Alec. First podcast ever. Hopefully, it won't be the last, but you'll be the judge of that.
Exactly. This was a lot of fun. We do hope we'll have you back for another one. So thanks for volunteering early. I appreciate that. And thanks to Rob for co-hosting. We'll provide a link to Dimitri's contact information and other resources that he mentioned in the podcast description. And thank you so much to our listeners for tuning in today. We're always interested to dive deeper into industries that you may be lending into. If you have any suggestions, feel free to give us a quick shout out on the Ask the Advisor feature. And a quick reminder that today's podcast is part of our overall series where we focus on topics, trends, and industries to help give you the edge. We hope you'll join us next time. Until then, happy lending.